This is Brian Clark, one half of the World Tag Team Champions Chronic. You're listening to WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum, and I'm all about breaking necks and cashing checks.
Hey everyone, welcome back to WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum, Wrestling's Glory Days weekly podcast. We're glad you can tune in and listen. We got one hell of a show tonight, brother. We got Lex Luger, author of the new book, Wrestling with the Devil. We're really excited to interview him. Coming off the eve of an unbelievable interview with Larry Zbyszko. That was awesome. Uncle Larry, I think I'm going to start calling him too. The way he told all those stories was great. So many things going on here at WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. My man, the Scum's with me now. What's going on, my brother?
Well, Steve, always a pleasure to be back with my longtime tag team partner. You know that that's you. Always a pleasure to be doing business alongside the Class Act and all the great stuff going on with the boys over at Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. I'm real excited tonight. The total package, Lex Luger, multiple-time world champion, one of the biggest names ever in professional wrestling. Lex Luger is with us tonight. Can't wait to dig in. Already been through the Wrestling with the Devil, already read his book, fantastic read. I'm sure that he will be touching on all points in his storied career with us. Just can't wait to dig in with the total package. Larry Zbyszko last week was just fantastic. A couple of golfing buddies back to back, Larry and Lex. Lex always, from Larry's standpoint anyway, it was always the club's fault when it came to Lex, but hey, it sounds a lot like my golf game. But anyway, fantastic job last week with Larry Zbyszko. I mean, like you said, Uncle Larry, felt like I was sitting on the couch there with him. I mean, I think at one point he was getting ready to order pizza or Chinese or something. So he felt right at home, just like most of the guests do here on WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. A lot of big stuff going on for us, Steve. Pretty exciting. Just seems to keep snowballing here. A lot of irons in the fire. Unbelievable lineup coming up. I'm super excited, and I know you are too, man.
Oh, absolutely. And just like we talked about before, at the beginning of the stages of this podcast, when we were mustering up the nerve to ask some of these superstars if they'd spend a few minutes with us, we were a little golf ball at the top of a snowy mountain, and man, somebody pushed us over the end, and we are gaining some traction, gaining some steam. Larry Zbyszko last week in a 2+ hour interview that was fantastic. Sure to please anybody that's a fan of the old glory days of wrestling. Lex Luger is no different. I'm sure he's going to bring it. He's got his new book out, Wrestling with the Devil. He's got his new Twitter page out now, @Genuine Lex Luger. He'll tell you a little bit more about that as we continue. But another huge announcement, Scum, and I know we touched on it in episodes past, just incredible. Steve and the Scum at a table at WrestleCade, November 30th. WrestleCade, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. A bevy of stars that you will remember. Certainly worth your time to come out, pay a visit to WrestleCade, check out the event. Who knows who might show up, Scum?
Yeah. I mean, already signed and delivered, sealed the deal to be there. Diamond Dallas Page, Jake the Snake Roberts, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Axe and Smash from Demolition, the Powers of Pain. Kevin Sullivan is going to be there. I mean, the names, too many even to fathom mentioning. I know some of the newer age, not anymore, but I mean newer than those older guys. You got the Hurricane, Shane Helms. You got Matt Hardy will be there, Carlito. Just a ton of talent. What a fantastic event. Can't wait. Just so excited to be a part of WrestleCade. You can check out that full lineup, and there's also a card afterwards, a live event. You can check out what's going on and what's developing with that at www.wrestlecade.com. Check out WrestleCade on Facebook. And, hey, show up there and check out Steve and the Scum. We'll be there with our friend, Justin Credible, former ECW champion. We're so excited to meet some of the fans, some of our listeners, and who knows what could lie in store there, Steve. Maybe there's some more irons in the fire there, too.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. I know, Scum, that we're always busy here at the corporate offices of WGD Weekly trying to bring out the best for you fans. And if you guys, again, if it's the first time tuning in and you just saw us with the big advertisement to have Lex Luger on our show tonight, we want to thank you all for tuning in. Let me take a second to explain to you guys what we're all about. We are a podcast dedicated to the glory days of professional wrestling. We try to bring you the best in classic wrestling, all that stuff you remember from the days of old. We'll talk a little bit about the current product, but that certainly isn't what we're on the air for. We don't give away any spoilers or anything along those lines, so don't worry about it. We're not going to tell you who won on SmackDown last night. All of our guests that you see here on WGD Weekly are ones that you can remember from the glory days of professional wrestling. So we wanted to thank you for tuning in. Definitely subscribe to our channel, WGD Weekly, on YouTube for the best classic wrestling content on Facebook. Check it out on your browser, on your mobile browser, www.facebook.com/wrestlingsglorydays. Pay them a visit. Always got new content going up on the hour every day of the week. Check out our sister page, which is our personal page. Myself and the Scum, our international correspondent, Matt, is also privy to put some stuff up over there, and that's at facebook.com/WGD Weekly. I know we got maybe a website we're looking at on the way. We got lots of stuff in the works, Scum.
Yeah, we do. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, again, like we were saying, the total package tonight, Larry Zbyszko last week, Alex Wright on the horizon next week. I mean, just names that are just huge names from the glory days of wrestling. Like you said, with Larry, and like you're sure you said Lex would, they're coming on, they're bringing it. I mean, just real exciting stuff going on, Steve. I mean, I can't wait. You know, I know that any moment now that phone is going to ring. We're going to have Lex Luger here with us on the show. Can't wait to hear his take on some of the most famous moments in NWA, WWF history, some of the most controversial moments as well. I mean, again, if you haven't picked up his book, Wrestling with the Devil, you can read about him there, but you're here, so you're going to hear him. You know Steven the Scum ain't going to shy away from asking the hard questions. We always play hardball. Like I've been known to say, the Scum always tells it like it is. So you know that you're going to hear some good stuff here tonight. Just can't wait.
Absolutely. And they say my middle initial is M, and it sure as hell ain't moderation. We're going to go full speed ahead. WGD Weekly with Steven the Scum. Scum, the phone lines are lit up. We got North Atlanta, Georgia on the phone. That's going to be Lex Luger, author of the book Wrestling with the Devil. We're so glad he's with us. Coming from Atlanta, home of the Omni, home of all those classic moments from the NWA and the Four Horsemen, Lex Luger with us now. Lex, thanks so much for joining us tonight. How you doing, man?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Awesome. What we want to do, Lex, ask you a couple of questions, more chronological fashion. So we'll start out nice and easy with your introduction to professional wrestling and even a little bit into your football career. So after you play, looks as though you started out at Penn State, went to University of Miami, and wind up in the CFL with Montreal, the Alouettes. You signed with the Green Bay Packers and move on to the USFL. And you make stops in Memphis and Tampa Bay. While you're with the Bandits, you were teammates with a man that you would eventually come to get really familiar with in the ring as well, and that's WWE Hall of Famer Ron Simmons. You had some great matches there with him in the latter years of WCW. All of this happens prior to you meeting up with Hiro Matsuda and the beginning of the path, down your wrestling career. So to start out, bring us back through your football days and your memories of Ron Simmons and what your relationship was with him and thoughts of both, him as a football player and in and out of the ring. And if you could, take us through your transition from that football time into the world of professional wrestling and how that whole process comes about under Matsuda.
Okay, good question. My football days, as you can see, I was kind of like a bouncing around from team to team and league to league until I had no idea this was going to be my destiny, but I finally met my destiny in pro wrestling. A lot of the guys in the locker room turned the wrestling on, and we loved watching it, and we thought it was a blast. And all the guys always said, "Man, Lex, with your physique, you should be a pro wrestler, man. You'd be, incredible." I never thought much of it, but finally, I heard when I was in Memphis, which is a big wrestling town, playing football in the USFL, everybody asked me if I was a pro wrestler rather than a pro football player for some strange reason. And I was like, man. And then I heard about Hulk Hogan, and Andre the Giant breaking the indoor attendance record. Not for wrestling, but for like everything. I was thinking to myself, wow, man, there must be something to this pro wrestling. Everybody asks you if I'm a pro wrestler. I must look like one. I never grew up watching wrestling. I go, now, they break this indoor attendance record with this WrestleMania thing. I'm going to look into this. So, prior to that, I did have Ron Simmons as a teammate. When I played for the Tampa Bay Bandits and Steve Spurrier, never realizing we'd both be pro wrestlers down the line in a couple of years. Ron was just, you talk about a guy with a incredible physique, even with all those outstanding athletes in pro football, just was head and shoulders above the rest. And so when I started out wrestling, Ron and I, down in Florida, I got started with Hiro Matsuda, who trained Hulk Hogan and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, just a wonderful guy. Well, I just walked into the office there at Championship Wrestling in Florida in the off season, thinking I was going to continue my football career. And Hiro Matsuda trained me in the off season. I ended up in the ring with my first match in late '85, and never went back to football. And Ron Simmons and I got together for lunch right after I got started wrestling. And Matsuda decided to train him as well. And about a year later, Ron was in wrestling. So that's to bring you up to speed on that question. I know it was long, but you asked me a lot of stuff there.
Quite all right. Take your time. We got Lex Luger with us. He's the author of Wrestling with the Devil. Some really good stuff there. I was able to start giving it a quick look here earlier this week at some good stuff. We'll move on to your early part of your career. Your football days are behind you at this point. You begin your career in Florida Championship Wrestling. You get thrust in the spotlight. You get your moniker, and now very famous of Lex Luger. You work in that territory, and there is a ton of names that everybody's going to recognize if you're a fan of classic pro wrestling. Guys like Barry Windham, Kevin Sullivan, Bad News Allen, the White Ninja, who would eventually be called the Great Muta. So in those early days, with you being so new to the sport, did you run into any jealousy or any issues from the veterans, some of the older guys, over the fact that you were getting a real push as all the way up to the top so soon? And also, were some of the more were there some guys on the roster there in Florida helpful to you when you were getting your feet wet there? And do you recall from your early days your favorite opponents to work with as you were getting trained in the ring?
And you ask a lot of questions at one time, don't you?
I try. We say we're only going to get a couple in, so I got to stack them up to try to get as much as we can.
Oh my goodness! Well, let me think. Good questions, plural. I didn't sense any jealousy or resentment. Maybe I was oblivious. But I was also very, very protected, nurtured, and sheltered by Hiro Matsuda, who actually came to ring with me the first 2 months as my manager, which he had never done before, which I greatly appreciate. I think he was thinking, man, this guy needs a lot of help, so I better go ringside. And, Wahoo McDaniels put me over for the big title down there, Southern Heavyweight title, just a couple months into my career. So it was like the 4th of July fireworks right away. It was incredible. And I really, the guys you stated there were most of them very experienced, talented guys. They were all very helpful to me. So I never sensed anything other than that as I got started there in Florida.
Explain to us, or tell if there's casual fans or fans that vaguely remember the glory days of professional wrestling. Explain to our audience, our listeners, the importance of who Hiro Matsuda was.
Oh wow! Well, he's just a wonderful, incredible guy. He had a factory down there. We call it the torture chamber because we train us. He turned off the air conditioning down there in the heat and humidity of the summer in Tampa, and train us there. He did everything with us. Whatever he asked us to do, we were following with him leading. And push-ups and Hindu squats. He'd bust you to see if you really wanted it outside of the ring before he can take you in the ring. He trained, like I said, a lot of the very top names in the business. Never had a school. Never charged a dime of money. Just loved the sport of professional wrestling for what it had done for him. And if he saw somebody he thought had potential to succeed like he had, he wanted to help the guys out. So I didn't realize what a incredible, real gem Hiro Matsuda was. And I'm, to this day, very thankful that at the beginning of my career, I had a guy like him to help clear the way and steer me and get me started.
That's awesome, yeah. Legendary trainer there, and of course, the names of the people that he's trained is very long. We won't get into that right now, but I wanted to touch on one more thing in Florida Championship Wrestling before we turn it over to the Scum with a couple more questions for you. But you're in Florida, and there's an often spoke about incident there, steel cage match, yourself and Bruiser Brody, late and great Bruiser Brody. And for whatever reason, Brody decided he didn't want to go along with the game plan, leading you to just climbing out of the cage and ending the match. So talk us through the match and talk us through what happened backstage. What exactly happened there, and what was your opinion behind all the incident? And give us your overall thoughts on Bruiser Brody.
Oh, wow. Here we go. I'll try to remember all those questions. You get asked this question a lot, and I was still at that point very inexperienced, still in my first year of wrestling. It happened to be my very first cage match. And I had no clue what I was doing. And I think Brody, once he got in the cage, he knew I had no idea what I was doing. I was like trying to run his head into the cage, and I didn't even have a blade on me to get any color, and I was totally clueless. And in retrospect now, I didn't realize at the time, I think about 5 minutes into the match, he said, man, this ain't working. And he just stopped working. Stopped selling, stopped working, and I didn't know what was going on. Unfortunately, I had Fonzie in the ring with me. My eyes had to be big as a saucer. I go, Fonzie, what do we do? And he goes, man, I don't know, brother. He's like, back him in the corner, start throwing some punches, and I'll tell you to stop. When you don't, I'll DQ the match. Because really neither of us knew what to do, but he was experienced. He said, well, the only way to get out of this is just to end the match because he stopped working. And as we all know, Bruiser Brody was a big, scary-looking guy, and man, I'll be honest. At the time, it scared the bejesus out of me. So when we rang the bell, they couldn't get the cage door open, so I was so scared. Not knowing what he was going to do, just looking at this big, scary guy who wouldn't say a word. I ran, jumped out of the cage, and ran back to the locker room like a jackrabbit. And then finally I collected myself and go, well, man, if I did something really wrong in there to offend him or anything, I know Matsuda would want me to go over there and ask him what I did. I'll go over there and take my beating or whatever I got coming. And I walked in there, and Serengo Humperdinck was his manager. And I peeked around the corner very sheepishly and saw Humperdinck. He waved me in, nodded it was okay. And Brody was sitting there, and his Lex just wasn't working there tonight, brother. He said, I was talking to Frank for the first time, I think, not Bruiser Brody, which was his real name, and he just said, Lex, just wasn't working. It's been a long day. We taped in the morning over in Tampa, drove over here to Miami. He goes, I'm a babyface down in, you may not know this, he goes, I'm a babyface now with the Von Erichs. You've already been on television at the time I had with Crockett's as a bad guy, a heel. He goes, it just wasn't working there. He was actually very nice. I was, as you can tell from where I was about 5 minutes before that, scared for my life almost. I was greatly relieved.
Sure. I would think so.
Fantastic stuff. I got to ask you a real quick sidecar question to that, and you certainly are helping to dispel a lot of the garbage that myself and the Scum read on the internet. And I'll be honest with you, Lex, this is one of the reasons. This story right here is one of the reasons why we decided to get into the business of podcasting and speaking with some of the past performers, because quite frankly, myself and the Scum included, we're sick to death of the crap and the recycled garbage that we read on the internet. People that just write their opinion, it gets based off, it gets turned into facts somehow. So I just wanted to thank you. I know you probably get that question a lot. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Bruiser Brody.
I actually talked to Danny Spivey, Dangerous Danny, on the phone the other day. I didn't realize he was at the stadium that night where an unfortunate, tragic incident happened, where he was supposed to wrestle Brody that night. I go, you were there? Yeah, I was had a match coming up with him. And he was stabbed in the locker room. He said before our match, he goes, I packed my bags and went to the airport and left the stadium.
Yeah. Really blame him.
But yeah, what a great talent. I mean, in Japan and worldwide, and yeah, the Brody was a great talent. Very unfortunate it happened to him. Danny told me he had a wife and a young son at home. It was just a real tragedy.
Yeah, that is a tragedy. Yeah, he certainly left long before his time. That's for sure.
No doubt.
So anyway, moving along now, Lex, you went to work for Jim Crockett Promotions. Once you got there, you were pretty much immediately put in a big program as an associate to Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen. Then when you became a full-fledged member of the group when Ole Anderson was attacked in storyline and you replaced him. Just wanted to ask again another couple-part question here. I know you like that.
I'm in the program now. I gotcha.
Yeah. So, whose idea was it to bring you in and immediately put you with Flair and the Horsemen? How influential or beneficial to your young career is working with someone like Flair, Blanchard, and Anderson? And being that he was somewhat known to, let's say, be vocal with his opinions, what was the reaction of Ole Anderson to being replaced as a Horseman by a young up-and-comer?
Well, at the time, I had no idea. I didn't know who the Horsemen were. I knew Ric Flair from coming to Florida, but everybody was going to me, Lex, you're going to be one of the Four Horsemen. Oh, my gosh, they're the deal. And I had no idea what an incredible opportunity I was walking into. And I didn't hear anything about what Ole thought about it, because what I heard when I came in there, I sat in the back with Ole and JJ and Aaron Tully and the guys, was that for real, Ole, his son was really big time into high school wrestling, and Ole just wanted a break and wanted to enjoy his family and watch his son go wrestle, so he didn't want to wrestle full time and couldn't commit, so they were trying to find a way to keep the steam on the Four Horsemen with him not wanting to wrestle full time anymore, maybe just come back once in a while. So I had no role in this, but they came up with the whole plan. Dusty and Crockett and Flair and Aaron Tully and JJ to concoct this thing. We beat him up and put him in a broomstick classic because he wanted to watch his snot-nosed kids wrestle, and he wasn't fully committed to the group anymore, and we can't stand for that because either you're all the way in or you're not, kind of like the Mafia. So
sure.
They concocted that plan, and it really was an incredible opportunity for me to be with the top elite heel group, both in the fans' eyes, but also behind the scenes. Tully and Arn would work extra with me in the ring on their days off. Looking back now in retrospect, I couldn't fully appreciate the time. To have guys like that working with me and working in the ring with them, and Ric Flair, of course, one of their all-time ring generals, if not the all-time ring general, and JJ as a manager, and just be able to soak it all in and travel with them, and what an incredible opportunity. Looking back now, I'm just so thankful for.
Sure. That is incredible. I mean, you can't ask for much, like we were just saying, you can't ask for much better than that as an opportunity.
Yeah, Rick had the world title. They put the U.S. title on me. Aaron Tully had the world belts. We could talk some trash.
That's right. Absolutely. That was a great time. I mean, being a fan, that was a great time. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was.
Continuing on here, you've becoming quite a superstar. Everybody in that group is. No secret among fans or listeners anywhere, the reputation of the Horsemen in the ring, and possibly even more so maybe outside the ring, let's say living the life of a Horseman. Take a few moments for us and explain, what it meant, what it was like to be a Horseman outside the ring, off the camera. And if you had a few good ones, maybe share some stories that you remember of the Horsemen doing their thing out on the town, like maybe as Flair might put it, styling and profiling.
Well, Rick lived his persona both in the ring and outside the ring. I found it out right away. I feel like for about 3 years there with hanging out with the Horsemen that I feel like I didn't sleep for almost 3 years. Rick was like a 24-hour man. Rick could stay up all night and keep me up with him. then he'd go to the gym and work out with me, and then go wrestle an hour Broadway. I mean, I don't know how he did it. And it was just, it really was limited. Rick always tell you, I mean, just everything. He always had a limo waiting for us. We flew usually private, or if we flew commercial, first class. Stay at really nice hotels. I remember I was just getting started, and I was on a beginner salary at first. And Rick and I checked into this beautiful hotel in downtown, like Georgetown area outside D.C. We were wrestling in D.C. that night. And Rick, as usual, kept us up all night. We had to fly out early the next morning, like at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., because we had like a double shot the next day in the afternoon on Saturday. This was a Friday night. And Saturday night, so we had to fly out of there like at 6 or 7 o'clock. Rick kept us up to like 4 in the morning out and about. Rick would pay the bands at the bars an extra $1,000 to play like for an extra couple songs. Rick never wanted it to end. Then we get to the hotel, and we looked at our watches, and Rick goes, "Man, we got to get to the airport for our plane." So I went to check out. I go, "Oh, wait a second, I got my bags up in the room." I never laid in the bed, and I looked at the price of the room. It was like $500. So I'd never paid that much for a hotel before in my life. So when I went upstairs to grab my bags, having not slept there, an hotel costing me $500, I actually laid down for about 30 seconds in the bed just to say I laid in the bed for that $500 hotel room. I was so mad at Rick. I was like, "Man, Rick, $500 for a hotel, and I didn't even get to lay in the bed other than for about 30 seconds. Now we're headed to the airport." He just laughed. He thought it was so funny. Rick was everything he said he was, both in and outside of the ring, for sure.
Very good, very good. Those are some great memories. I mean, we appreciate you sharing them. That is fantastic stuff.
Many times that way, night after night.
Sure. Well, I would say any fan, at least it was a fan through their era, loves a good Horseman story. That's for sure.
Yeah, that wasn't. Yeah, when Rick talked that on TV, he wasn't just talking it. He was walking it and living it.
Sure. So moving along at that same time, while with the Horsemen, he feuded, as like you said, the U.S. champ with Dusty Rhodes, Nikita Koloff. That time a concept came about that we spoke with a couple weeks back, maybe about a month ago. We had Precious Paul Ellering on for an interview, and we talked with him about the War Games. Bring us back to your memories of that time, how the War Games concept came about, and take a few moments to tell us what it was like working, such high-profile, memorable matches with the Road Warriors and Dusty and Nikita.
Yeah, I didn't have anything to do with the concept, obviously. They dreamed it up, and at the time it was, I don't know if it ever been done before, had it?
I don't think so.
And my memories of that are, number one, the Omni, the very first one, the atmosphere for all of them, guys. But you talk about a Super Bowl or just something, the atmosphere in the Omni there in Atlanta was absolutely electric. I mean, the energy in that building, when that War Game started, the anticipation of the crowd for each guy who would come in at different intervals, it was brilliant. And it was unbelievable thing to be a part of. And some other fond memories of the War Games when Sting got involved and would leap from one ring to the other across both ropes with that incredible vertical jump he had. And the fans would just go like crossbody, two guys, Arn and Tully. It was every time we did the War Games, we had the same atmosphere. We started taking it around at the Omni because it was so popular, and it was absolutely, it really is indescribable for me to tell you right now, the atmosphere in the buildings. I don't think, even with the Wolfpack, I don't think I ever felt the energy and electricity in the building of any type of match, anything I ever was at or witnessed in my 15-year career like that. Absolutely incredible.
I can imagine. I mean, that was some great stuff. So before I throw it back over to Steve and he moves along chronologically here, I just wanted to ask you, while we were still speaking of your time with the Horsemen, what were your thoughts on the group's induction couple of years back here to WWE Hall of Fame, and I wondered as a fan, just because I remember that classic run when you were with them, did they ever talk about you going in with them as well? I always wondered why either way. I don't know if you have any knowledge of how that decision was made, but, it would have seemed to fit. Don't get me wrong, Barry Windham certainly deserves in there too, but I always consider Lex Luger a Horseman. Would you know, did you have anyone touch base with you on that or anything?
I didn't. I don't know what the talk was on any of that. I was just absolutely thrilled that the Four Horsemen and really the standard of excellence that they represented was being inducted. And there really was. A great argument made for Ole, a great argument made for myself, for Barry, there was some other guys after that. I don't think any guy would have been a bad choice. I do think Rick and Tully and Arn and JJ were the real foundation. So any other name of that fourth guy really was a toss-up. I was just thrilled to death that the Horsemen were inducted. I feel like I was a part of that group, so I felt like I was going in with them. I wasn't one of the guys at the ceremony being inducted. And Barry was going through some health problems at times, so I was thrilled for Barry. I thought it was a great timing for him. And it's just great and for me at the time, that was the feelings I was going through at the time. And I'm glad that those guys were all inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I do feel like a part of it because I was part of the Horsemen, that the group was inducted in there. So that was my feelings and my knowledge at the time of that.
Yeah, no, I just thought I would ask. Again, like you said, I don't think that there was any wrong choice for yourself, Barry, Ole, like you said. I think anyone, even if everybody was a part of it. And like you said, there's definitely a large part of that legacy through those classic War Games matches and everything. So I just wanted your opinion on that. Yeah,
I think it was like a win-win situation. I felt like I was going in there with them, even though I wasn't officially. I felt like I was. I thought it was fabulous.
Sure. Well, hey, maybe I'm sure at some point we see Lex Luger in the WWE Hall of Fame either way. I would imagine.
Hey, you never know. You never know.
Sure.
It'd be a great honor.
Yeah, well-deserved, too.
Thank you.
Lex, you mentioned the word standard of excellence. Now, being a fan, I've heard you use that in your promos multiple times as a younger person, so that's really awesome that you use that terminology, because I know I've heard you say that in your promos as a younger kid, so that's great. And you also
I can't take credit. That was from JJ and them. I borrowed that from them, but thank you.
maybe it's just the way you said it. I remember. Anyway, we were talking about Barry Windham here, and that name comes up in my next question. As you take part ways from the Horsemen, you team up with Barry Windham, and you go through the first Clash of Champions, which was a television program that was in competition with Vince's company at the time. That was free television. It was a pretty controversial thing at the time, and throughout the course of time, they've had several more since. But on the first Clash of the Champions programming, you won the tag belts with Barry Windham. But out of nowhere, Barry turns on you to eventually, ironically enough, join the Horsemen, leading up to you teaming up with Sting. And then you guys capture the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup, which was another major event of the time. So first, why at this point does Lex Luger leave the Four Horsemen? And then, it's no secret that yourself and Sting would be great friends. So please give us your take on first getting to work with Sting, and tell us how that relationship evolved, how close the two of you are, and how close you guys remain to this day.
Okay, I'll try to remember all that. You're dealing with a little bit of short-term memory here. All those concussions. I'm joking. The love tagging with Barry Windham. We had a blast both in and out of the ring. We're and are very good friends. We don't stay in touch real close these days, but have Barry just always be just a real fan and friend, and very fond of Barry Windham. He's very helpful to me in my career, both in and out of the ring. We loved traveling together, had a very close relationship. on the turn that's another moment. Talk about electricity in the air. The way that tag match came off with Barrett, I'll never forget. It was in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, I had over 4,000 matches, so to remember that one match, for me, means it was very, very special. And when they had Barry turn on me, and the fans realized that they had planned it and left me laying there, and I had color that night, literally in Jacksonville, Florida, guys, down in the Deep South, they were coming over the guardrails. Security, they had to be escorted from the building. I mean, the heat in that building. Now, you talk about a home run on a turn. Wow, Barry Windham was sizzling hot as a heel after that. I mean, throw water on him, you couldn't get it out. I mean, that was a great, brilliant turn. I had nothing to do with the idea, but to be a part of that, it was incredible in the building that night. Now, to go on, that did lead to me eventually teaming up with Sting and win the Crockett Cup, and we didn't hit it off. I go into the book how Sting approached me the first time, and I was real cocky and arrogant and completely blew him away and blew him off, and he walked off, and thankfully he gave me a second chance, which I go into detail within the book as well. And we ended up becoming just best of friends, in the ring, out of the ring, all the way through our careers. At my worst of times, he stood by my side and tried to connect with me when I wasn't able to be connected with back at the low points. And to this day, his son's playing for Kentucky this year as a freshman in football, and we were just talking the other day, and we were texting back and forth, and I was at his Hall of Fame induction. I had the privilege and honor of being Hogan, myself, and Dixie, of being one of the 4 speakers to induct him into the Hall of Fame at TNA, and we're just words, once again, guys, can't describe what he means to me, what kind of friend he's been to me, and what an incredible talent he is in the ring, and what an even more incredible guy he's outside of the ring. Just A+, gold star, outstanding guy.
That's outstanding information here. And now, again, Lex Luger with us here, WGD Weekly, and we got Wrestling with the Devil by Lex Luger, and Sting actually does the foreword here. And as you had mentioned, I'm going to read this passage real quick. Won't give a lot away, but when I first met Lex Luger, I didn't like him at all. The guy must have been the total package, famous for having the greatest physique of anyone in pro wrestling, but I thought he was rude and an arrogant jerk. So that's how the book starts, folks.
Oh, yeah.
That's
definitely the truth.
Well, in all honesty, sometimes the best of friends are made when you guys have a little static to when you start out. But, we're going to move along here. Once I find my place, I think I lost my place when I picked my book up. And I'll try to ask single-line questions, Lex. That way it
That's okay. I think I'm sitting with the program.
Yeah. No, we're going to just move along. We'll keep it in time order here, chronological order, where the last question began. It's 1988 or so. You're feuding with the Horsemen, leading to a big showdown for the world title with Ric Flair at the Great American Bash, where it appeared you had won the title, but the decision was actually made to stop the match due to a major cut opened up on your forehead as Flair escaped with the title. You were red hot at this point, on the cover of all the magazines, and probably the most popular wrestler in the promotion at the time. Was there actual talk of you finally getting that taste of the world title gold? It would seem an obvious fit. Big guy, huge, super popular. So why at this point do you feel that in this match, or even in the ensuing rematches throughout that year, and you had another controversial loss at Starrcade that year, do you feel that initial title run eluded you for some reason? What was the reason why not you weren't able to grab that belt?
I was a good foot soldier. I didn't do any of the planning or who wrestles who and when and who wins and loses. I was just thrilled to be a part of that. I mean, we went to every building after that match. What a great finish. Because for real, if you're bleeding at the time, if there's any color in Baltimore, the commission stops the match ringside. It was a shoot. And the commissioner afterwards was angry. He thought we had used him, which we had. And I had Flair in the rack, had a world title won, and I got disqualified because of blood. Just before I put him on the rack, ringside by the commissioner for real. He stopped the match. Had him ring the bell as I was getting Flair up in the rack because I was bleeding. So, brilliant finish. The fans were just bought into it. I went around the horn with Rick, which is what they wanted. We sold out everywhere. And it was just it was a thrill to be able to work with Rick and singles match up for the world title every night. And what a great learning experience. And I never gave much thought of whether or not I was going to ever win the title or not. I was just thrilled to be in a world title match with Ric Flair. And then I think Ricky Steamboat came in. I think that was his next program, I'm pretty sure. And, man, Ricky Steamboat was just one of the best baby faces there is. So I didn't really give it much thought at the time of whether or not I should be the champion or not. I was thrilled to be working with Rick for the world title. I wasn't worried about whether I was going to get it or not.
Sure, that makes sense, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, you looking back, guys, I was brand new to wrestling. I didn't know really any the behind-the-scenes things. I wasn't privy. I didn't sit in those meetings. I was just out there, like, almost in awe of what was going on so early in my career.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's probably better to just, like you said, be part of the program and enjoy what you're doing. You know, don't have to worry about who's making those decisions.
I was just oblivious.
Sure.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's a good way to be.
Dusty and the Crockett's and everybody there, they didn't, I would never set in any of that stuff. They kept me probably on purpose, intentionally, as far away from that as they could, which I appreciate, really. It made it more enjoyable for me.
Sure, that is good stuff. Obviously, I remember that Great American Bash match. That the fact that the doctor thought you used them, and you did. that's great stuff. I wasn't aware.
Yeah, he was angry. He was irate in the back afterwards. Did you guys get color on him? Did you guys use me? Because this guy was the real deal, like ringside state athletic commission with the pro boxing, and he was insulted if we had used him in a scam. Finish. Right. He was irate.
That's good stuff. That is.
Yeah.
I don't think I remember hearing that.
I've never heard that. We lied and told him, no, sir. That was all that happened. That we didn't plan that.
Sure. That makes it even better.
Yeah, they've actually talked about not letting us come back to wrestle there in the building.
Wow.
I mean, it was that serious. Yeah.
Sure.
From what I heard.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the next question, again, you kind of foreshadowed another one with the name you brought up. Heading into the next year, you worked a program with a guy you just talked about, referred to as one of the greatest baby faces of all time, Ricky Steamboat. Many people consider him, like you said, one of the greatest in-ring talents of all time. Seemed like it had the makings of a classic feud. I mean, it didn't necessarily last as long as some of us fans would have liked that feud, but there were certainly some great matches between you guys. What are your memories? What are your thoughts on working with Ricky Steamboat at that point in time?
Well, no matter how inexperienced I was at the time, hard to have a bad match with Ricky Steamboat. That's how good he was. Thrilled to work with him. Great guy in and out of the ring. Class act. Our thoughts that come to my mind about Ricky was the first guy to really sit down with me and start to mentor and teach me how to have my own match. Meaning, if I'm not paired with him, he was such a wonderful guy. He wanted me to be able to understand how to call a match in the ring. So he would take me through our matches and house shows step by step over the months we worked together, where he'd call the whole match for a while, sit down with me afterwards, explain why he called this, when and why. Then he had me call the beginning of the match. He'd call the middle and the end. Then he'd have me take us through the beginning and the middle part of the match and have me call. He'd correct me afterwards when I did something wrong. You should have done this here. Until finally, in our very last match together, he allowed me to call the entire match, including his own comeback. I was like a little kid. I was so excited. I even took a slam off the top like Ric Flair. I wanted to give him such a big comeback, which I'd never done before. Rick was a great guy, great talent, and actually taught me how to call my own match, the psychology of what you do and when you do it. He worked with me on psychology of the fans, how to build a comeback into the heat so that you didn't let your babyface die in the ring. I mean, he was just an artist. He was incredible. I don't know how much of that I retained, but, man, he sure tried to teach me.
Sure. Well, hey, he did a pretty good job. You went into quite a career, even before that, but after that as well. Obviously,
yeah, he was an incredible guy.
That is great. Again, you hear that I don't think I've ever heard anything but that from anyone about Ricky Steamboat.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sure.
Sure. So then, moving along, 1991, once again, you wind up the number one contender to Ric Flair in the world title. They even kind of alluded to the previous controversial finishes that Steve was asking about in that question. And there was originally a steel cage match set for the Great American Bash that year between you two, so Flair couldn't get disqualified or whatever to keep the title. Match never happened, though, because there was some conflict there with Flair in the front office, and he winds up taking the WCW title and leaves and goes up to the WWF. Actually showed up on TV with the belt. You did, though, then wind up getting your first world title in a match with Barry Windham, who you already talked about. Looking back on the events at that time, was it ever laid out, were the plans for that match at the Bash ever laid out with you and Flair? Were you supposed to get that title run there anyway? I know you said you didn't have much to do with that planning, but was that in any way brought about to you? And was wondering, what was the reaction there in the WCW locker room and everything when Flair showed up on the opposition's television show with the WCW belt?
I was scheduled to wrestle Rick in the cage, as we all know, and I was scheduled, because I was the babyface in the cage, I was scheduled to win the title that night. That was what I was told I wasn't told a lot, but they told me, we're putting you in the cage with Rick and you're winning the world title.
Would that have been...
As far as what happened after that was political stuff behind the scenes that I was not privy to. Yeah. I heard that Rick was trying to negotiate a new contract, and I wanted the best for Rick. So when Rick ended up on television with the belt in the competing organization, I never had any hard feelings about that because I knew Rick had worked so hard in his career, had such an incredible career. He was trying to do what was best for him and his family, and from a business sense, I never took it personally or never even framed it that way. I was disappointed I didn't get to wrestle Rick in the cage to win the world title, but I wasn't upset with Rick that he went and did what he had to do, what he thought was best business-wise for Ric Flair.
Sure.
So I was just disappointed I didn't get to wrestle Rick for the title because, man, what a thrill to be able to beat Rick in the cage for a title, but he did what he thought was best for him and his family and for that stage of his career in the business end of things. I never feel that, did you take that person? No, not at all. I never took it personally. And WCW at the time, they were negotiating with Rick really right up until almost the day of the match. The week of the match to still come in and do the match. And it just fell apart at the last minute. And they did the best with Barry, obviously great talent like we talked about earlier. To substitute in as the number one contender. They brought Harley in as my manager, had me do the pile driver with him, and switch heel with Harley ringside in the cage, sliding the belt underneath the ring, and had me pile drive Barry in the belt with Harley's finish. And we all, nobody, I mean, Ric Flair leaving WCW, Rick almost was WCW. So for Rick to leave was a huge void and vacuum that myself or nobody could possibly even entertain the thought of replacing. And so we all just did our best to, under the adverse circumstance of how it all came down, to work our best together to move on and We even had a fake belt that night. We couldn't even really hold the belt. Don't hold the belt up. The camera guys might get a shot of it. They didn't have a belt ready yet. That's how much they still thought Rick was going to still be there. And unfortunately, he wasn't. We all just picked up the pieces and moved forward, did the best we could as a group there at that night at the arena. And, yeah, I think a lot of the guys are disappointed Rick wasn't there, but we all, the showbiz goes on, right? The show must go on.
Absolutely. And again, like you said, Ric Flair, like you said, though, a lot of people, any fan, was WCW. So, whatever he needed to do, I could see, especially when you said, how influential and how much time you'd spent with him. I could see where it might be disappointing that to get the title match with Rick, but I could also see as a friend and a colleague where you would say, hey, I respect what Rick's got to do. So that's pretty cool. Again, I just
Rick,
sorry to be unclear on the question.
And brought me up like a little baby on a bottle through the beginning of my career. I'd never had any hard feelings towards Rick. I have nothing to this day but appreciation for all Rick did for me and the way he mentored me and took me under his wing to this day. So I had no hard feelings about Rick leaving. I was just disappointed to get to wrestle him in the cage. Other than that, selfishly, I wished back then and during my career and now nothing but the best for Rick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a quick question before we move on here, Lex, and this is a repeat subject matter that we've talked about here. You've been in several high-profile steel cage matches and some legendary ones. Was that a gimmick match that you enjoyed working?
I think it added a little excitement for the fans. So yeah, I think it heightened things a little bit. When a guy was in a cage match, usually meant that the issue was going to be resolved. It couldn't be resolved unless you put it in a cage. So I think for the fans, it definitely usually, if you're in there with a good, the right kind of talent like a Ric Flair, obviously it heightens things. So yeah, I think cage matches, back then at least, still had quite a bit of significance.
Yeah, it was one of my favorites. And again, you talked about this a couple of times too, with the blood and everything. And we're back to the point now where they'll have, and per points of time they'll have dangerous and violent matches, and yet nobody bleeds anymore, and it almost takes away some of the believability of it. But we'll move on. And you're still a WCW champion here. We head into 1992. You're the reigning champion. You're not seen so much on television or on any sort of activity until about Super Brawl, and Sting comes in and gets you. He wins the championship, and shortly thereafter, you go up to Connecticut, start working for Vince McMahon, but not in the WWF, though, but in the upstart WBF, the World Bodybuilding Federation. So to start, what led to you kind of sitting out for an extended period of time while you were still in WCW as the champion, and what prompts you to leave WCW, and how is the whole deal made with you and Vince McMahon for you to head up to the WBF? How were you contacted, and how was that deal made?
The direction of the company, getting back to what we spoke prior about the huge void with Rick, obviously not being there anymore, I just felt there was a lot of instability in the front office at the time, and I didn't think there was a real clear direction for the company. And me not wanting to be one that got politically involved, I kind of was like, man, if this ship is going down possibly, I don't want to go down with it. So I thought, how could I possibly make the transition to get to WWF? I still got over a year left of my contract here with WCW. So with the way things were going, I actually put a proposal on the table to them that I would forego, and they were firing a lot of the managers and going a bunch of budget cutbacks. So I was thinking they might nibble at the opportunity to unload a large contract like mine at that time in the business. And so I said, if I relinquish, I told them I was burnt out, which was the truth. I wrestled long and hard 3 nights a year for the first few years. I'd like a year off to train and maybe pursue some things in fitness and nutrition that I wanted to do. And I owned a gym and a fitness center, and it was Sting. I said, I'd like to take a year off and spend some time with my family, which was also true. And they agreed to let me out of my first last year of my contract with the stipulation I couldn't wrestle for anybody else. And we agreed upon that. And I had the idea of contacting Vince. I contacted Vince myself and said, I can't wrestle for a year, but, I've always loved working out, and Vince always had the same passion for fitness nutrition I had. He was trying to do that nutrition company, IcoPro, and the bodybuilding thing. What if I came on board as like a bodybuilder? I go, obviously I couldn't compete as a pro bodybuilder. I'm a wrestler, but we could have me Vince came up with the idea, and as a guest poser at a WBF pay-per-view, it might add some spice to that, and then that would be a good stepping stone for me a year later when my contract enabled me to wrestle again to step right into the WWF from the WBF. And Vince thought about the idea, and that's, give Vince an idea, and he'll, or a opportunity, he'll take it to the next 20 levels. He is a marketing genius, so he jumped all over it, called me back, and we did a WBF thing, and which segued me into the WBF. Unfortunately, I never posed, which I go into detail in the book, about a motorcycle wreck I had about 2 weeks. I was in the shape of my life. Unfortunately, I had a motorcycle wreck 2 weeks before the WBF show, and I almost lost my arm. It was a very serious wreck. It was a miracle I survived that wreck. I didn't get to pose in the show, but I was ready for my debut with Bobby the Brain Heenan, posing at I think it was in Sacramento early the following year.
That's why actually, and again, you are a natural segue artist. This is the third time now, and it's perfect because my next question is a short one, and we're going to talk about Bobby Heenan. When you come to the WWF and you make your debut, it's not as the total package that we're used to, but as the narcissist. And I can almost hear Vince McMahon's voice when he tells you that the gimmick he wanted to maybe offer you was the narcissist. So what are your thoughts at the time working with Heenan, and also where does the moniker of the narcissist actually come from? And what are your thoughts on that whole gimmick?
I loved doing it. It was a blast. Holding real guys in front of mirrors after you beat them and pick out all their faults. I was having, at the time, the way I was back then, I was having a blast with that. It was all Vince's idea. I had nothing to do with it. I thought we had a blast with it. I was having so much fun with it. I was kind of disappointed when he told me about he started explaining to me the transition I was going to make with the red, white, and blue, and I was kind of disappointed at first because I was having so much fun with the narcissist. I felt like I was just getting underway with it. It was a lot of fun, and here I had J.J. dealing with the Horsemen. Here I come into the WWF, and I have another all-time great legendary manager. Bobby the Brain is my manager. You can't ask for a better opportunity than that. So I was excited with the narcissist. I love being a heel. Coming in, it's a lot easier to make people hate you than it is to people trust you and love you as a babyface. So I loved the opportunity. I thought it was great. And it was WrestleMania with Kurt Hennig was Caesar Palace, man, with the girls holding the mirrors, the showgirls. That was a really fun time.
Sure.
That's awesome.
That was great. I could see where that could be fun. Kind of picking up people's faults, having the mirrors and stuff out there.
Oh, yeah, it was a blast. The guys used to get the TV and see their name on the list for TV matches, and I'd see Vince called them I didn't like the name jobbers, but the talent enhancement guys would hang their head and shake their head. They knew they were going to be on TV with me. With everybody at home, me picking out all their faults about their body fat and the way they looked. They'd have a big boo-boo face when they had to wrestle me as the narcissist on TV.
Yeah, you were all on camera.
Oh no, I'm wrestling Lex on TV tonight. Oh no.
You seem extremely personable, great sense of humor. On camera, you always were good with that heel gimmick and with that. You played it well, man. Definitely.
Well, it came pretty naturally back then, guys.
Yeah.
I didn't lack much confidence back then.
Sure. Well, rightfully so.
Humility wasn't one of my strongest attributes back then.
Lex, I want to sneak one quick question in and bring it back over to the Scum here, but you obviously were in top peak physical condition, even could be considered to be in sort of a bodybuilding federation. But ironically, Vince himself was certainly in top peak physical condition as well. Did you ever cross paths with him in the gym or work out with him at all? What was his work ethic like?
Oh, man, he was a gym nut. Is, always will be, just like me. We were like two peas in the pod where we hit it off. I initially met him, I explained in the book, the first time I met him was in a gym in Las Vegas while I was still working for the Crockett's. And we always had a great relationship. Vince always treated me like a member of his family, invited me out to his house. We'd hang out poolside. Had a great relationship with Vince McMahon. He treated me very, very well the whole time I was there.
Very good, very good. Hey, Lex, I wanted to sneak something in before we moved along your time in WWF. You a few times have mentioned the book, Wrestling with the Devil. I just wanted to throw out there for our listeners, when I picked up a copy of the book, just what an absolutely fantastic read it is for any wrestling fan. I mean, I honestly, this is no lie. The first day I opened it up, I started reading right from the beginning. I looked up and it was about 4 hours later, and I was most of the way through the book. I mean, just a great read. So any of our listeners out there, I just wanted to say, Wrestling with the Devil. I mean, we're going through Lex's career here with him, and we're really excited for him to be with us and to be reliving this stuff. But there's a lot of books out there, a lot of guys have written, and this is definitely one that you want to pick up. It is a fantastic. I couldn't put it down. So I just wanted to you brought up a few times, I go into detail in the book. I just wanted to reiterate for our listeners out here that it is great stuff. It is a great read. Again, I had trouble putting it down. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Well, thank you. Very kind words. I can't take much of the credit. John Hollis, the local guy here in Atlanta that helped me write it, and sports writer, and great guy, and Tyndale, the publishing company, and I happened to get introduced to Tony Dungy's literary agent, DJ Snell. They all put the whole thing together. I never imagined the world I'd ever write a book. I was a guy back in high school, couldn't even write a 2-page essay, so I had a lot of help, and it turned out just wonderful, and thank you for your kind words. I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. Thank you.
Yeah, no. Again, before we moved on, as you had brought up a few times that you went into detail in the page of the book, I just wanted to relay my opinions to our listeners. Tune in each week. So
very
anyway,
kind.
yeah. Well, hey, well deserved. It is great. I enjoyed it a lot. And so anyway, to move along here in the WWF, you again kind of foreshadowed where I was going. When you were saying you were kind of at first disappointed moving into the red, white, and blue. You showed up on 4th of July, the USS Intrepid, slammed the huge, I think he was 600 pounds or so at the time, champion.
627, I saw him weigh in a truck scale at an airport over in Europe.
Wow. 627.
Yeah, only airport cargo scale could weigh him back then. I saw him step on it, 627 pounds.
Unbelievable.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was so unbelievable. We didn't know live. I was so nervous, not knowing if I could be able to slam him live or not. It was. I go into detail once again in the book, but it was when Vince laid this out to me that I was going to go from being a narcissist to a Lex Express bus and a slam heard around the world on the USS Intrepid. Man, first of all, I got called into his office. I thought, off the road, I thought I was in trouble. I felt like I was getting called into the principal's office. Like I'd done something wrong, and he laid that whole thing out, and I thought he was crazy. But thinking, would that really work? How can you go from being a narcissist to the Lex Express in the red, white, and blue? But he goes, watch me, it'll work. And he definitely is the master marketing, ring psychology guy of all time because, man, the crowd went crazy on the Intrepid that day the way they set that whole thing up with the helicopter and pushing Bobby out of the way when all hope was lost, no one could slam him. None of the football players or the basketball players or wrestlers or Scottish Highland strongmen games. It was set up so beautifully. When I slammed him, the crowd went berserk. It was one of the highlights of my career. It was a great moment. The Lex Express trip was was set up incredibly. Had a great turnout. Everywhere we went, there was huge crowds. fans were super excited, and leading all the way up to SummerSlam. It was a great summer.
Yeah, sure was. So continuing on there, the question I was going to ask following up that, the Lex Express, you did the tour across America, leading up to SummerSlam. You faced off. You did win that match. It was a count out. Didn't have the title, and you continued working with Yokozuna. You and Bret Hart were the co-winners of that year's Royal Rumble. You had the match at WrestleMania. Again, as a fan, and I was always a fan of yours, watching, it just seemed like at that point, you were the number one good guy, almost like you had come in and after Hogan had left, and you were kind of that, all-American superhero guy. It just seemed like at some point in the matches you had or the feud with Yokozuna that you were destined to have the WWF Championship. I guess it never worked out for whatever reason. Was there any specific reasoning? Was there a plan that, for some reason didn't hash out, or?
Well, once again, guys, I was never one to get involved in the booking side of things and what's talked behind the scenes. I was never privy to that either there at the time. Vince was very forthright. He never made me any promises for the belt, contrary to what is said. Vince never promised me the belt. I knew that he was going to be wrestling with Undertaker after SummerSlam, so I knew I wasn't going to win the belt at SummerSlam. And I wrestled Yoko when we went to Europe. I'd wrestle him there to keep the thing going a little bit. And then he never made me any promises at WrestleMania between Bret or I or Yoko. They just set it up with the Royal Rumble, and Vince never made any promises with me in that regard. So, nor did I expect him to make me any. Well, why would he? I was thrilled to be a part of, to be in the main event at WrestleMania. My goodness. At WrestleMania 10 in New York, that's fabulous. So, only mention you ever made of it at SummerSlam, he almost, I think, out of our friendship said, well, Lex, you're not going to win the belt. At SummerSlam, here he goes, if I ever do the belt with you in the near future, I'd rather do it WrestleMania 10 if we did do it. He said, because that's a special place for me, my dad. I think it'd be a special place for you if we decide to do that. But he never said he would. He never promised it to me, nor did I expect it. So, contrary to popular opinion about, it's funny, I was talking in another interview recently, guy said, dude, it was on your Wikipedia that you were drunk the night before at a bar at WrestleMania 10. You were supposed to win the belt, and Vince got mad that you would. I wasn't even anywhere near New York. I was with my wife and 2 kids in Hartford, Connecticut. Was staying with friends the night before WrestleMania. So I I did a lot of stupid stuff back then. I go, but that wasn't one of them. But I go, like you guys said, rumor becomes fact sometimes. I've laughed at that for years of all the stupid, dumb stuff I did outside of the ring. That was one I did that I didn't do. Like I was in a bar somewhere, drunk, spoiling the finish the night before. I always found that very humorous. Crazy how rumors in wrestling can start, right?
Sure, just like Steve had alluded to earlier, that's kind of one of the things where we got that we try to be unique from the other shows, which why I think we've gotten such a good response with guests and people that have come on, is that, again, somebody is telling you that on your Wikipedia that this happened, when it's you they're telling you to, and you know it didn't happen. So, again, just something like that, like you said, it's almost humorous that some other person is trying to tell you what happened in your life.
I always took that. I always laughed about that. I thought, my goodness, that is so funny. Who came up with that one? I go, my goodness. I did enough dumb stuff. I didn't need it. I go, that's piling on.
Right. Yeah, well,
it was.
We appreciate you clearing the air on things like that. Because,
hey, it is what it is. We can only control what we do. We can't control what other people do or say. So it's all good, man.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, from our standpoint, it's cool to hear that, and it's good to hear the truth, and for people to actually hear that, that I don't know that I've ever heard what you just said you were told, but about a bar or whatever, but it just sounds like nonsense. Speaking with you, and, how you were saying how much you appreciated being in these spots, for someone to randomly make something like that up and then put it on some website, it's just mind-boggling to me.
They take a life of their own, funny.
Yeah. I don't get it. All right. Well, anyway, you're there a while longer in the WWF, and then what a lot of people consider the first shot fired in Monday Night Wars. The debut of Monday Nitro. You show up and confront Hulk Hogan just on one night or days, anyway, after competing for the WWF still. Again, this is probably something you're asked about a lot, but just for our listeners, go back through the story of how the switch to WCW comes about there. And I wanted to kind of, just because you have been asked that a lot, what was the take of both of the men in charge of the companies at that time? Like, what was Vince's reaction to your appearance on Nitro? And, Eric Bischoff in his book, and a few times has said at that point, even though I find it hard to believe because of what a huge star you were, but I've heard, read in his book and in things, he wasn't necessarily that interested in your services at that time. But, first off, how did this appearance on the first Nitro come about? And then what were Vince's and Eric's kind of response to that moving forward?
Yeah, the actual scenario was incredible. How it all came down. I was my contract was up with WWF at the time. I was working on a handshake, which was unheard of in wrestling with Vince, but we thought so much of each other, and I had planned on continuing and finishing my career there. I never even thought of going back to WCW, and Vince and I were trying to do a contract where at the time, I could be allowed to maybe do some outside things to earn some extra money and fitness and nutrition, which is and always will be a passion of mine. So we were trying to work that out. I had, on a casual conversation with Sting, close to when WCW launched their show, which I didn't know they were launching a show. Shows how little I know of. I'm in La La Land. Sting, when he found out I wasn't under contract, he goes, "You mean you're on their television, on their pay-per-views, and on their TV, and you don't have a contract with them?" I go, "No." He goes, "So you could walk right from their TV to our TV." I go, "Well, I didn't think about it, but I guess I could." He goes, "Let me call you back." He got on the phone with Eric. Eric wasn't real keen on the idea. He was not a big Lex Luger fan. He had heard a lot of things about me about being arrogant and things like that. Rightfully so at the time, I'm sure. And he wasn't all that keen, but Sting pretty much sort of was my agent and brokered the whole thing, got me signed up, and I went from a house show in WWF that weekend to Monday Night Nitro at the mall. They snuck me in a back room with a towel over my head, the big trench coat, and even the boys, they wanted to be a total surprise. Even the boys at WCW didn't even know I was going to be there until I walked to the table out of hiding right before I walked out there and got nose to nose with Hogan. Even nobody in the locker room even knew I was going to be there except for a couple people, Hogan and Eric and Sting. Pretty incredible.
What was Vince McMahon's reaction?
Well, I wasn't there. From what I've been told, it wasn't real positive. So
He didn't try to reach out to you or have like Pat Patterson or anyone get in touch with you after that? It was just pretty much over with?
Well, I at the time, even back then, I was a different person back then, but even back then I was very uncomfortable due to having such a great relationship with Vince and how well he had treated me the whole time I was at WWF. And the way Matsuda taught me to be in the business, you're supposed to at least give a 2-week notice, even though I didn't have a contract at the time. And I wanted to give notice, and Eric was vehement that if we're going to sign you a contract, we want this to be a surprise. That's why we're bringing you in. So if you're going to give notice, Eric said, we can't do the deal. So I was torn between what I thought maybe might be best for my future and my family and giving Vince the proper notice. In retrospect now, I probably would have stayed I definitely would have stayed at WWE because I couldn't have left without giving him proper notice. But I did. I had great regrets over that at the time. Felt very bad about it, and obviously, understandably so. Vince, it was a very unprofessional way to do it, and Vince was shocked to see that I had done that. And I can't answer for Vince. You have to ask him that question, but I'm sure he wasn't happy about it. We did reach out to each other later on, and we did talk in an airport maybe about a year afterwards, and he was very class act as always, very cordial and wished me the best. And Vince has stayed in touch with me throughout my best and my worst of times over the years. And at my worst time, he asked me if there's anything I needed. And he's a great guy, class act.
That's a very interesting statement there, Lex, and we appreciate that because, again, now, well, not going to get off track too much, but, being able to set the record straight on a couple of things that we, as wrestling fans, you have to weed through in the internet again. So that's some fantastic stuff, and we greatly appreciate it. But now we're planted back into WCW, Eric Bischoff at the helm, and here comes the black and white. It's the NWO. They invade WCW just a little bit down the road from when you make your re-debut with WCW. The fans can't get enough. They're eating it up. You're probably arguably one of the main players, at least in the ring for the WCW side on this on-screen war. Actually, you get a nationally televised clean win over Hollywood Hulk Hogan at the time to once again become the world champion. Now, bring us through this red-hot period at both WCW and in the whole world of professional wrestling. What was it like working in WCW at the time with such a huge star both in and out of the ring, and how were you approached and told you were going to go over with Hogan for the title, and where does that title win in your eyes? And you mentioned, 4,000-plus matches, so I can't hold you to anything, but does this particular title win rank highly on your list of matches that you performed in?
In answer to that question, without a doubt, what an honor and a privilege. Hogan had what we call creative control, meaning he could say yay or nay on any finish, and he had earned that right with what he had accomplished in the business, the amount of money he had drawn. And for him to decide at the height of probably the most breathtaking, electrifying period of time in wrestling, record ratings, and it was red hot. He was a leader and the world champion. Hogan felt that the fans needed just a little bone from the NWO because they had left us laying night in, night out, meaning the WCW guys. So Invasion was just an incredible storyline, obviously. Fans fed off it. I think it brought the best in both companies, both with WWE and with WCW, every Monday night. People were channel flipping. Just a glorious time to be in pro wrestling. What a great way to get, as we move towards the end of my career, to be a part of that was just phenomenal. To have the sort of, I guess, as phenomenal as all that was, the cherry on the top was the world title win over the NWO world champion, the immortal Hulk Hogan. Wow. I did not find out that I was going to win that match until right before I walked to the ring with the referee, Nick Patrick. They wanted it to be a surprise to the fans because they knew if they got word out that I was going to win, it wouldn't be a surprise for the people in the building or for their response or the people at home. And that was part of what fueled the ratings. So it was a great honor, a great night. That definitely, even though I had 4,000-plus matches, that definitely was a enormous fond memory for me. The crowd went absolutely berserk that night. I'm sure everybody's told me the fans at home did as well. They were in shock. He had never lost on television, ever.
Oh, yeah. I was watching that with the Scum. We were going nuts.
Yeah. Even all the boys in the back afterwards, they went to the back with all the guys. The guys were excited. Everybody was excited. Even the boys in the back. It was a very cool moment, cool night.
Yeah. We were talking about when we were preparing the questions and stuff here. We were talking about. I don't think Hogan ever lost on TV. It's funny that you said that. Never. We were talking about that. Yeah. Very good.
Even for the smart marks, so to speak, it was a huge surprise because they were like, Hogan, if Hogan ever loses, he'll never lose on TV. He'll pick a pay-per-view where there's a small audience. Every kept putting me over with my own finish, torture wreck, right in the middle of the ring on national TV. Wow. Incredible.
That is incredible. What an honor, definitely.
Yeah.
Steve had spoken about the high point there, the boom period of WCW, the NWO, that match with Hogan. You moved on, you worked in the Wolf Pack, and then a few years later, though, the wheels kind of started coming off of the company. There were notable changes in the organization. Eric Bischoff kind of removed from power, and they bring in WWF's former writing team, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara. A lot of people seem to have an opinion on that time. Again, you're still one of the top stars in the company. So just wanted to ask, that time, all that change, with the change in the creative there, what was your opinion of that whole era when they changed and Russo and Ferrara came in?
Well, in our business, timing's everything. And in the ebb and flow of professional wrestling and the Monday Night Wars and the talent, The Rock and the Cena coming in and that was building at WWE, we had drubbed them for so many. Our repeats were beating their primetime show. And when things started to go the other way, like you said, it's a momentum business, and I think that Russo and Ferrara, they did their very best to create maybe a young, fresh group of guys kind of doing the invasion like NWO did. And really, on paper, a pretty darn good idea. And they had a great reputation coming from WWF, or WWE at the time, I'm sorry, for being very creative. So really, when we felt ourselves slipping, most of the guys, consensus-wise, were pretty excited that they were coming in. And I think they gave it their very best effort. And the young guys came in and gave it their best effort. I think part of the problem was for the young guys, when they came in and were like beating these legendary guys like Hogan and guys like that in the middle of the ring, that I think the fans, as much as they love seeing young talent emerge, I think it was a little bit too much too soon, just in my opinion. And the fans didn't really buy into it like I think they had hoped. It was a good idea, but the fans didn't quite buy into it with the momentum already headed, like you said, in WWE's way, in a big way, with the talent and things they were doing. It was kind of, they did their best, but they just didn't get, things just didn't work out, I think, the way they had hoped. It wasn't from a lack of effort on the new guys' part, the writers or the young wrestlers. It just didn't get over, I think, the way that they wanted to. And but I didn't think it was a bad idea. It just didn't work the way they wanted it to, unfortunately. Now, That being said, if we had continued on and WCW hadn't been merged and sold to WWE, available at Time Warner, if Ted was still in charge and said, I'm going to have wrestling no matter what, who knows what would have happened a few years from then. Momentum could have swung the other way again, I believe, personally. But when the ratings took the dip, AOL Time Warner had always sort of considered wrestling a good ratings, but kind of the black sheep, and when we didn't fit into their long-range, a decade from then, planning. And when they had the opportunity to unload it when ratings dropped, they did. I thought it was unfortunate for wrestling at the time.
Yeah, I think most fans, like we are and were at the time, would agree with you there. I would agree with you, too, personally, as far as the whole new blood, the Vince Russo era. I thought it was a good idea, too. Maybe, like you said, maybe a little too much, too fast or something, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good concept. I think, like you said, maybe the momentum had switched. I think those guys take an awful, kind of an unwarranted beating from the same thing we were talking about, the people who like to say and make things up and write things on their websites. I think that those writers have been scrutinized as much as anybody, when really the whole concept and what they're doing, there were some goofy ideas, but I mean, for the most part, like you said, it was a pretty solid concept overall. So it's refreshing to hear somebody say that, actually.
For Ric Flair and those guys who paved the way for Stings and myself, and I mean, that's the way this business is. For Cena's now and The Rock, somebody, meaning star guys, had to develop and put those guys over. And that was the concept of what they wanted to do, and I was in favor of it. I go, that's great. I mean, guys did it for me. Why shouldn't I do it for them? So on paper, like you said, and the premise of it was a good idea. I just think momentum had slipped so much that it just didn't get over the way they wanted to. But I don't think it was a bad idea at all.
Right. I would agree with that. So then shortly after that, again, you just alluded to the, WWE, Vince McMahon buys out the company. Couple things on that I wanted to touch on. First, what was your reaction? Obviously you had a relationship with Vince. Like you said, you guys were close. Again, even through times after you had left the company. What was your reaction when you first found out about WWE purchasing WCW and Vince starting out? Nitro came on the air and there was Vince rubbing his hands together. So on Nitro, it was pretty surreal.
I was happy for Vince because I knew, man, he had won, man. That was a genuine moment for him. I was like, yeah, buddy, everybody had you counted out there when we were on and beating you for X amount of weeks straight, and there he was, man. I was happy for him, and here I was. I had almost 2 years left on a multi-million-dollar contract guaranteed with AOL Time Warner, so I was a happy boy too. I could sit at home and watch it all unfold and collect a big fat paycheck, so I was on cloud nine as well.
Sure. So is that why there was never any talk of you coming in? I mean, Lex Luger would have been dynamite as part of the WCW invasion. I mean, what that would have been.
I would have loved to do it. But I had 2 years left on a multi-million-dollar contract guaranteed. Goldberg and I both had a couple of years left, so I couldn't have come in at all, whether I wanted to or not.
Right. Yeah, that explains where I was going to go with that. But as a fan, man, to see you and Sting and Goldberg and all those guys were a part of that invasion, I think it would have went a little differently than it did, right?
I would have loved to have been a part of it, but just contractually, there was no way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Folks, we're with Lex Luger here as author of Wrestling with the Devil, co-written or actually written with John Hollis. Wrestling with the Devil, Lex Luger. We got a couple more questions here for you, Lex, and we'll let you go for the night. We really appreciate it. I actually got one question here left myself, and I'll turn it back over to the Scum. We really appreciate your openness and honesty to all these questions. You've been a fantastic guest, so I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, thank you guys. You guys asked a bunch of really good questions. I've enjoyed it myself. Thank you.
Fantastic. I got one more for you, and again now, a little bit touchy, and you're a smart guy. You see where we're going with the chronology here, and it's only evident that we need to talk a little bit about Miss Elizabeth and her passing. If you're comfortable there, people unfairly form opinions, and we've talked about this again tonight. Rumors fly all over the place, but since we have you here, and if you would like to, if no other reason than to just simply clear the air and give the internet reasons to stop writing a bunch of BS and touch on that situation, and please explain to our listeners exactly what transpired there, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I don't dodge that at all. I go into detailing it in the book. And very dark, sad time in my personal life, we talked about the glory days of my wrestling. I had a 15-year fabulous career, loved the fans. They're second to none. They talk about NASCAR fans, just magical times with the guys at the buildings, just incredible career for 15 years. But guys, I go into detail in the book, I'd made a lot of bad choices outside of the ring over the years that led to me giving up my family. I had a beautiful wife and 2 children. I was one of those guys that work hard, play hard, but goes on the road, stays on the road, developed a double life. And there's a lot of collateral damage from that to my family, my friends, and those closest to me, including Miss Elizabeth. She always will be the first lady of wrestling, and I know she's got an incredible, rightfully so, group of fans out there, and it was a real tragedy. I was living a lifestyle back then that a lot of drugs, alcohol, a life I call it the life of folly in my book, but it led to a lot of tragic things, and that was the biggest tragedy that you ever think of, to have a close friend and like Elizabeth as a result of people say, well, Lex, you didn't make her drink or shove pills down her throat, but I was a very big influence on her life at the time. And I was doing that, and she wanted to do what I did. So if you talk about regrets in the past, guys, we can't erase the past, and we got to take responsibility for ours. And I take a lot of responsibility for that tragic event and what happened, and it was a very dark time, a dark moment for me, and it was a great loss to a lot of fans and her family and to everybody involved. It was a shock. No one ever expects something like that to happen, but when you play with fire and drugs and alcohol and that kind of lifestyle, things like that happen. It was very, very tragic.
Understood. Certainly. Been some pretty crazy ups and downs in your career, in your professional and private life, and you're able to share several moments with us tonight, Lex. So again, we wanted to thank you. Wrestling with the Devil, Lex Luger. If you could bring us up to date on what your life has been like, over the past recent couple of years, and in rehabilitating and just moving on and getting yourself into a happy place.
Yeah, I can't take any of the credit there. God's put a lot of wonderful, incredible people in my life. Pastor Steve Baskins, who I go into detail in the book, who shared the gospel with me on April 23rd of 2006, the biggest moment of my life. And it's been a supernatural change for me ever since. The people God's put in my life, how them and God brought me through a very serious spinal cord injury where I was given a 0 to 5% chance of any movement from the neck down back in late 2007, and I now live independently and don't have 100% neurological recovery yet, but I live on my own, drive. I go back to the gym now and do some lightweight training, and I'm in just a wonderful spot. I have my own company, Total Package Fitness, with a consulting firm. I work with all types of people on fitness and nutrition, and God's got me in a wonderful place, guys. I'm very thankful for what He's done, how He brought me through that injury. I don't even know how I could have faced an injury like that. What's the worst thing you could think of happening to a pro athlete your entire life, and a guy like me who's all about the physique and the muscle, to lose all my muscle and not be able to weight train heavy anymore? It's just been it's turned out to be a blessing in my life, which I talk about in the book, rather than a tragedy, which everybody thought it was at first. And I am living the dream here in Atlanta, my friends, here at the Command Center, I call it. And I've got tons of wonderful friends, a great family, and doing what I love to do with ministry and with fitness and nutrition. So I am a blessed man, guys.
Well, you made two more friends tonight, that's for sure.
That's right. That is just fantastic to hear, Lex. Before we let you go here, I was just wondering, have you had been doing any work with WWE? I thought that I may have seen that somewhere, that at some point you were working with. I'm not really sure in what capacity, but is that, again, is there any truth to that, or was what I read?
Unofficially, I work unofficially with the wellness department and with anything I ever do to help. Obviously, guys, as we talked about, what I've been through in the past, if I can be of any help to any of the guys that might be struggling, either new guys to get them on the right track, don't do what I did. The current guys that are struggling, they might relate to somebody that they don't want to maybe discuss it with certain people. That they know they can talk to me about it, and there's other guys as well where we're there to help. And it fits in with what I do for guys being happy and healthy. And a lot of the retired guys. Scott Hall's in Atlanta here now, and he's the best I've ever seen him since his wrestling days. He's doing great. He stops by my place here, and, man, DDP's done great stuff with him. It's wonderful to see Scott, like me, was one of the guys most likely to be found dead in a hotel room or something, and to see him thrive and flourish with his young son, Cody, starting his career. That's part of what I do now, is to help the guys any way I can, and to give back to what wrestling gave so much to me and the fans gave so much to me. I'd love to be available to give back anything I can to the guys and to the sport of professional wrestling. So once again, that's what I do, and I'm thrilled to be able to do what I do. Thankful for each day.
That is fantastic, Lex, and I'm sure that who better to lend a hand with what you've been through, what you talk about in detail in the book, and what you've shared with us tonight. That is just fantastic that you're giving back, and it's fantastic to hear that you're doing.
And how could I not, guys? After what the fans welcomed me back after all that happened, you always have your haters out there, and I understand that. I did a lot of bad stuff back in the day, and I understand that as well. You can only live your life forward and be the best man that you can be from this day on. I can't go back, and one of my mentors told me, Lex, you can't go back and unring the bell. It's been rung, but you can, from this day forward, do your best to be a man of honesty, integrity, and character, and appreciate a second chance, which is what God's given me. But I know there's people that, have feelings, and we don't dwell on that, but I understand that. You can ask for forgiveness, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to forgive you. There's consequences for things we do in the past, and I understand that. But I'm thankful for the majority of, once again, how great fans are in the wrestling public and the WWE and everybody involved. Whatever thought I never would, to give me a second chance and to welcome me back, so to speak, into the wrestling family. Because I think the fans in wrestling is a very special, unique business, and that for them to, after what did happen, to welcome me back into the family, and to just be able to do an interview with a couple of great guys like you. You guys have done a great job in the interview. You've asked a lot of great questions, and you guys exemplify what the sport and the world of wrestling means to fans and people like you in the media. And it's just a global event now. When I go back to the WrestleManias, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it, guys. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Well, Lex,
awesome.
you had a couple of fans here to begin with, and I know I speak for Steve when I say I personally, and I know he is, very impressed with your openness and your willingness to help and to give back, and a fan of the person as well. So we really appreciate you.
Guys.
Thank you so much.
You guys have been fantastic, man. Thank you.
Lex, we're gonna sign off here and say farewell with you. We really appreciate it, folks. Get out there and get a copy of Wrestling with the Devil. It's a great read, affordable buy, nice hardcover. It's a great look. Oh, Lex, while I got you on the line, could you do us the smallest favor? We had a contest last week. And,
by the way, guys, I just started Twitter. I'm brand new, so I got to get some followers. So tell them to go @Genuine Lex Luger. If you could.
@Genuine Lex Luger.
Man, I'm getting into it. I'm a no-tech guy, so tell them to be patient with me, but I'm just learning how to tweet and Twitter. So it's @Genuine Lex Luger. I just started. So
can I ask you a small favor? We got a young lady that won a copy of your book. Your publicist was nice enough to donate a copy of your book to give away, and we did do that. We had a winner. Her name is Arlene Wilson, and I bet you she would be tickled pink to find out that you sent her a little personal message here on our show, WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. If you have a moment, if you could, give Arlene Wilson a quick message about the book.
Arlene, I thrilled that you're the winner, and for being a loyal listener. You've been rewarded, and I hope the book is a blessing to you, and I shared my heart in it. I hope you enjoy it. Congratulations, Arlene.
Fantastic, Lex. Thanks so much.
Thank you, my brother. We shall stay in touch. You guys have a wonderful day.
All right. Thanks, Lex.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care. Well, Scum, again now, reaching higher ground with the show, WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. We just got done with one of the greatest interviews I've ever heard, and I am very happy to be a part of it. It was something special.
Wow. Yeah, jaw-dropping. I mean, open. Again, we've said from the beginning when we've come on here that you go through the run-through almost every show. You're not going to hear this. You're not going to hear that. We're not your ordinary podcast or website that digs into this. You hear things about certain people. We went through it when we had Buff Bagwell on. Lex Luger is another case. Dispelling the myths. I mean, again, I'm sure there's going to be people out there that, like he said, are going to hate and are going to believe what they want to believe. I have a hard time believing that wasn't a genuine and heartfelt what he was saying there. I again, seemed like a great guy, great sense of humor. Just sat down and spent, 90-plus minutes with us, reliving his career, thanking the fans. To me, that was real special, Steve. You know what a fan I am of his, and that you are as well. To me, that was a real special interview. I thought it was fantastic.
Absolutely, and you're talking about a staple in the professional wrestling industry for 15 years. Lex Luger is as common a name, and he seemed to be a modest enough guy to maybe deny this, but anybody that watched wrestling for more than 2 months of their life, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Sting, Lex Luger, if you watch wrestling from 1985 to 1995 and you don't know who Lex Luger is, you weren't paying attention.
Right. And again, I get a kick out of with what we always go back to here, Lex dispelling some of the myths. I mean, who does somebody think they are? He said that he was on some other show, and I have no idea. I didn't hear this show, so I don't know who it is. But for lack of a better term, you have some bozo sitting there interviewing Lex Luger, legendary wrestling fan. You have some clown telling Lex Luger that he was sitting at a bar giving out the finish to WrestleMania 10. And Luger is actually with his family in Hartford, Connecticut that night with his wife and family members. And you have some guy saying that he read on Wikipedia that, no, you were drunk and in the bar and that's why you didn't get the title on. I mean, where does somebody get off? Some guy never spent a minute, probably in a gym. I definitely never spent a second in the wrestling ring, and he's telling Lex Luger, a multiple-time world champion, one of the most recognizable figures in the thing, what he was doing, drinking in a bar, what he was telling people the night before WrestleMania 10.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, we've had these conversations off the air and, out at the local pub and stuff, and I really can appreciate what we try to do with our show is that because I got a guy like yourself, Scum, that we've been friends for so long, we could talk wrestling and have an open dialogue and an open debate and be good about it. And what makes me sick to my stomach is that I can count maybe on one hand how many people on this planet I would want to talk about pro wrestling with. Not because I'm embarrassed to be a fan, not because I haven't been a fan since the early 80s. It's the fact that most of the people out there either regurgitate the biggest lines of BS you could possibly find on the internet, or they just didn't watch wrestling as hardcore as I did, and they just, they're like, okay, yeah, that's cool, man, I got you, Hulk Hogan, woohoo, I got you. What's the Yankee game score?
Sure. Well, I mean, again, when you say things like that, and you say it's one thing, again, you come to expect. Just from what you've seen over the years as it's grown across the internet, wrestling, and whether it's through forums or chat rooms or whatever else, now with Twitter and with all the different means of social media that you speak of, you've almost come to expect it from some slab sitting behind a keyboard when they don't have, they don't have an ear, or they don't, it's easy to be a gutless coward and, brush the, as we like to make the analogy, brush the old Cheeto dust off your chest while you're sitting down in mom's basement and type away, badmouth someone like Luger or somebody who, poured their heart and soul into the sport, and it was a physical specimen that people couldn't even imagine. But when you're actually on an interview with the guy and you're speaking with him, the audacity of some idiot, some schmuck, to sit there and tell Lex Luger what he was doing the night before WrestleMania 10 when he's saying, I was with my wife at our family's house in Hartford, Connecticut, the audacity of some schmo, the term I like to use that you just heard me use, some bozo sitting there telling him that, it's outrageous to me. I mean, we can move on. There's so much to recap with the interview with Lex. Again, I just had to vent on that a bit because, again, laughable is one thing, but ridiculous. I mean, just foolishness that somebody would sit there. Again, you expect it sitting behind and, amongst your friends, say what you want, this or that. You got the guy, he's giving you his time to put over. You know people are going to listen to your show when he's on there. And again, we hit all the hot button topics. He talked about Miss Elizabeth, and he was very open about it, and actually very accepting of responsibility when no one asked him to be. He talked about all that. He talked about, you know, what went on when he jumped from WWF to WCW, and then he felt bad, you know, in retrospect with the jump and his closest hand with McMahon were. He was very open about that. You know, but again, we led the question and let him go where he wanted to with it. You know, you have to ask those questions, but to matter-of-factly tell someone where they were at some point in their life when they're doing you a favor, doing your show a favor, doing you know, bringing fans to you, because I will guarantee you one thing, whoever dropped that on Lex Luger, nobody gives a flying fuck about listening to them on their show. I can guarantee you that. Without Lex Luger,
that's crazy, though, because they love it. They eat it up. Ooh, listen to that. It's not even true. Like,
well, again, and Luger was the first to say, you know, hey, he was not, you know, he said it himself. This is not me saying this. I didn't know him, but he said, you know, I made some mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. I'm not proud of who I was. I'm not proud of how I acted. I'm not proud of how I carried myself. You know, I'm sure a lot of people say he understands those things. Well, again, people don't know him personally. Maybe if you worked with him and he treated you, you know, wrong or something like that, okay. But from a distance, to just form that opinion, I remember when I put up the teaser on Glory Days, way back when we first got confirmation that Lex was coming on the show. Somebody, and I don't know who it was, went absolutely ballistic and just ripped him into it. And then there was another follower of Glory Days on Facebook that responded and had said, you know, Lex is a friend of mine, and he's genuinely, you know, seen the evil in his ways, and he's this and he's that. And eventually, after a bit, the person who at first said that was man enough to say, well, you know what, if that's the case, then I take back whatever. So again, it's not always that someone sticks to their opinion. So it can be, I guess, you know, people can be, but why write that to begin with? Why say that to begin with? You don't know the guy. We just spoke with him for an hour and a half. I don't know the man.
Yeah, just, folks, if you want to have a laugh, go to Google, type in the words keyboard warrior, and then click on images. And sit back and relax and get a good laugh, because that's what we're talking about right now. If you guys get a laugh, we really appreciate it, and thanks for listening to our show. Keep in mind, these people are actual real people, too, and they broke their ass for 15, 20, 30, 40. Bushwhacker Luke did it for 50-plus years, and he's still going. He does it to make a living, and he does it to make the fans happy. These people broke their ass, whether you cheered them or booed them as a fan because they were a rule breaker, a fan favorite, or they're a guy that you liked, or a guy that attacked one of the guys you hate. Okay, that's what it's all about, man. It's about being a fan of the action in the ring, of the action when that red light turns on. How many people out there are sitting behind their keyboards, knocking back everybody that they can think of? Every single person listening to this program, I guarantee you, whether it's a big one or a small one, has a skeleton in their closet. You know what I mean? Yeah. Don't be, and you said this before, I think, in another program where you don't throw stones when you live in a glass house. So anyway, that being said, we're wasting a lot of valuable, precious airtime, Scum, on one of the best interviews I've ever had a chance to be a part of. And I'm not just saying that because he had nice stuff to say about us guys. Listen, I'm 40-something years old. We got kids. Scum, you're in the same boat. You tell me, working in a sales environment, working as a journalist, I can smell a bullshit artist a mile away. I know when someone's lying to me, and unless that guy was maybe the best liar ever on the face of the planet, he was a genuine man. He told the truth on a lot of subjects that I didn't even think he would. Considering what I had heard about him, if I wanted to build an opinion on Lex Luger having never spoken to him, okay, I would have thought that 3 or 4 of the questions that we asked him, number one, right out of the box with Bruiser Brody, I thought for sure he was going to be like, I don't want to talk about that. Because of the perception of this man on the internet. Not because I knew the guy or not because I heard him talk about it at some other interview somewhere. It's not that's not the case. It's the perception that he has on the internet that I was like, geez, I don't know if he's going to answer this question. We're going over these things. Like you said, we have a review and make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's. The Elizabeth question, I didn't think he would get into it. I honestly didn't. And he took every question in stride and he answered them in full, and we greatly appreciate it. So anybody listening out there, again, this is the product you're going to get. Full, unadulterated interviews at no cost to you, mind you. So thank you very much for tuning in. WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum. Scum, what did you think about that whole interaction with he and Frank Goodish, Bruiser Brody?
That was actually where I was going to start, Steve. But before we get into that, I just want to make one thing clear on what we were just saying. Now, again, most of the fans who tune into our show, obviously, they're wrestling fans. They wouldn't have even be listening to us if they weren't on the internet. If they did, that's where you would find us. So, again, I want to be very clear on that. Again, there is a stigma there, let's say, that we are talking about. Definitely gets under your skin, definitely gets under mine. One of the factors that initially led to us starting this podcast. And again, the point there is not to offend anyone. The point is not to say, hey, we got your ear, we're better than you, we're not. We're very well-versed, we're very comfortable with the fact that we are first and foremost wrestling fans. We enjoy wrestling, we always did, still do, still enjoy watching it. And it's always been something that I know in speaking with Steve, and I know as a friend that, again, if you really have that big of a problem with it, I just don't understand why people need to get so personal on people and their attacks, like you said, with their scoutings of the closet. Again, did not mean in any way to offend anybody. Did not mean to. Again, whoever the fool is that was asking him, telling him where he was that night in an interview. I don't really care if he was offended. I'm speaking to our listeners, to our fans. Whoever that was that conducted that interview, you're an idiot. You're a complete idiot, and you're what's wrong with the internet wrestling community. Now, to move on to what you were saying, Bruiser Brody, yeah, I mean, imagine that. He walks back, he's shaking in his boots. He's got this wild man. Like he said, all of a sudden it was the first time he ever spoke with Frank, not Bruiser Brody. He walks in there. Long story short, he's expecting to take a beating, and here's one I thought I'd never hear. You know what, that Bruiser Brody, he was a nice guy. Didn't think I'd hear that. So that was what he said. I just heard that out of his mouth. Really nice guy. And again, not that I'm just saying the in-ring performer, the stage persona, let's say, of Bruiser Brody was that of a bloodthirsty madman, stomping around, screaming huss, just a wild man. So, it's cool. It was cool to hear. And Lex was, again, right from the beginning, very open about it. I didn't know what the hell I was doing then. I was so green and it didn't work, and so understood. He took he accepted responsibility right there, right early on in the interview for that, and it was interesting to hear that story, and walk back there, and you didn't know whether Brody was going to jump on him or what was going on.
Yeah, no doubt. And, again, now talking about rumors versus fact, the big rumor to that whole legendary story was that somehow or another prior to the match, Lex Luger was being verbally bossy or something along those lines with Bruiser, trying to call the match. And, later on in the conversation, and I know we're skipping a little bit, we'll get back to this, he actually mentioned how much of an honor it was when Steamboat allowed him to do a little bit more match calling throughout their program years down the road. So I cannot envision, having spoken with Lex Luger tonight, that he in any way, shape, or form walked into the arena into Bruiser Brody, got in his grill and was like, yeah, this is how it's happening. Yeah, right. But not to mention, the guy was in the business for just a few months or maybe a year or so, and he walks out to his first cage match, and it's with Brody. And, yeah, he's trying to tell people what to do. Put yourself in that position, Scum, or anybody out there listening. You're working. It's your first week of work, and you're dealing with the old-timer, and, you guys are in some way or shape or form employees. You guys are equally paid, or however you want to say it, and you go up to this guy, and you're like, oh, yeah, this, and this is happening. All right, dude. Out of 100 people, maybe one or two dickheads will do that. But nobody does that. Dude, Lex didn't do that. He walked out to the ring not knowing what the hell to expect, into a cage. He was trying to work a cage match, probably to the best of his ability, being so green in the industry. And Brody simply, sounds like to me, like Brody was just simply in a bad mood and didn't feel like wrestling. And I'm not saying that in a bad manner. I'm just simply calling a spade a spade. I think that's exactly what I took out of this, was like Brody's like, I had a long day. I'm a baby face here. You're a heel. I'm a heel. You're a face now. I've had it. I'm tired. I've been doing this for years, and I'm done. I want to go home and get some rest. That's what I took out of that.
Yeah, I think he said exactly what Lex said, if I'm not mistaken, was, Brody just said this ain't working. So,
yeah,
again,
yep.
honestly, and again, I'm not one of our favorite competitors of all time, and again, left us way too soon, Bruiser Brody, but in that situation, I never shy away from being the unpopular one here, but if there was anyone who was acting unprofessionally in that match, doesn't seem like it was Lex Luger.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then it sounds like Bill Alfonso, the referee, was probably as baffled as Lex was, and geez, I mean, he was scared enough to forgetting the door to get unchained or unlocked. He just topped that thing and was gone. I watched that match. I was actually, somebody posted on our Facebook page at Wrestling's Glory Days not too long ago. I actually gave it a quick watch, and I don't think I had ever seen that whole match. It's probably 7-8 minutes long, and the match is a standard wrestling match with a cage around it for about the first 3.5 minutes. And then it gets a little weird. Lex tries working the cage, like he says, and exactly what he said now is he got back Brody into a corner, and you could see all three people in the ring, the referee, Lex, and Brody in that corner, and it was the far away corner, and the camera angle that I was watching was like a home video, so it didn't have any elevation, and it wasn't like, that stage camera that we see now where you could see the whole ring and the surrounding area. It was actually looked like a fan camera. It looked like maybe somebody from the second or third row actually filming this. So it was the farthest corner away from where the camera shot was, so I really couldn't pick up what was happening. But it seemed to me as though the three of them, or at least two of them, were having a conversation, and it turned out to just be a mess of a match. And listen, those are the growing pains, and a lot of times that type of stuff was, in dark matches and house shows and things along those lines. And a matter of fact, if that person that didn't have the video camera that day in the arena, that probably would never have been shown anywhere. So, moving on from there, what a hell of a career. I mean, you go from that type of an atmosphere with the people that were in Florida Championship Wrestling, and it was always a hotbed down there, just like it was another territory that made a lot of money and did very well with the Grahams in charge. He goes up and immediately walks into the Four Horsemen, Scum. Yeah.
Steve, before we wanted to touch on something kind of that fit into what he said, there was another surprising thing with that he was a nice guy that we just talked about with Brody. Later on in the interview, another person that you don't usually hear that he was a nice guy, that was the verbiage that he used speaking about Vince McMahon. Always stayed in touch with him, with that night when he swapped the Nitro off his shirt, and obviously Vince probably wasn't happy about it then, but within a year runs into him at the airport. Once again, long story short, what Lex had to say, really nice guy.
Well, yeah, and I think Vince took a liking to a guy like Lex because of his physique. Vince is always attracted to those guys, and I don't have to know the man to know that. I mean, look at the history of the performers that have been in WWE. Speaks for itself. Lex Luger is chiseled out of friggin' granite. That guy's huge. He's always been jacked up. He was in the prime of his career and in peak physical condition. Vince McMahon himself, peak performer, wanted to get the WBF off the ground. Look around the atmosphere of pro wrestling at the time. Tony Atlas was getting a little too old, so his lines were gone, and I know he was a tremendous bodybuilder. Paul Ellering, another guy, a former guest of ours on our show, another guy that kind of had seen the prime of his career where he was in his peak physical condition was long prior to that. So of all the candidates to come in that wasn't in the WWF at the time, Lex Luger had to have been at the top of the list simply based off of his physique. And, Vince McMahon is a smart man. He's a business guy. And another guy that I love dearly as far as a character in the industry, I think he's done some great stuff throughout the years. And it was a venture that didn't pan out. But you know what? The best businessmen, and they say this, and if you guys, I know you listen to The Herd, I listen to The Herd on ESPN Radio. Colin says this all the time about the most successful men in the world have a venture, it fails, sweep it under the rug, move on. All right, the one that tries to keep sinking money into a failed ship, hint, hint, WCW, that's the people that fail. Those are the people that end up bankrupt and destitute. Vince McMahon will never be that way because he understands what success takes. He understands that once you try something and it doesn't work, you sweep it under the rug and you move on. You move on to the next venture. And the whole time you have steady flow of revenue coming from the biggest wrestling performance organization on the planet.
Sure. Sure. Well, again, just because we had just talked about the nice guy, I didn't mean to throw us a curveball there and get off track with what you were talking about. But I know you're a big Vince guy, and I'm sure that you enjoyed his recollections of, how close they were and everything. So I just wanted to throw that in there to make sure that we got in our little recap here of the interview that we touched on that. Getting back to the Horsemen, what you were saying, yeah, great stuff. I mean, like you said, you're walking in, you're working with Tully, you're working with Arn, you're working with Ric Flair, dispelling another myth about Ole Anderson. All you ever hear is bad things. No, Ole wanted to spend time with his son and watch him wrestling. So again, that wasn't the answer I was expecting with Ole's reaction. But getting on to the Horseman being the Horseman, didn't sleep for 3 years, the man said. Now, I can relate to that. I had a stretch from about 96 to about 01 where I didn't get too many winks myself. I wasn't riding alongside the Nature Boy or anything, but, I can, and I certainly wasn't hitting the gym and going out and wrestling a 60-minute Broadway. That's for goddamn sure. So, pretty awesome stuff with the 4 Horsemen both in and out of the ring that he had to say.
Oh, totally. I'll tell you what, I can totally empathize with both of you. I turned 21 in June of 1993, and the next thing I knew, it was 2003, and I was proposing to my ex-wife at the time. So, yeah, there's about a 10-year stretch there, 93 to 03, where it's real foggy. I know we caught some good wrestling events in there sometimes, Scum, but other than that, yeah, it's a real messy time. But, well, those things happen to the best of us. We'll move on, but I wanted to touch base on one more thing with the McMahon thing, and this kind of answers a question that I think you and I have, and we talk about this sometimes in our wrestling chats, when the night when the talent was going through during the buyout, and Vince was like, oh, yeah, we'll keep him. And, oh, yeah, he's double, what was it, the thing with Double J where he's like, you're double fired, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, he read off the JFF, and he's watching Nitro on the monitor on Raw. Yeah, that was good stuff, definitely.
Luger was one of the guys he talks about there, and again now, I think it was a rib more than anything else as you look back on it.
Well, maybe, again, Vince is no dummy. I'm sure he has people telling him what's going on, even if he's not reading it. So there certainly was a perception that there was some bad blood there. I mean, until I heard Lex say in the interview tonight, how they had stayed in touch and after the jump to Nitro and everything. Again, I was under the perception that he was going to say, that there was, they didn't get along, that there was a wedge driven in there when he jumped ship to WCW, but on the contrary, he said pretty much the exact opposite.
Yep, absolutely. You're absolutely right. What a stellar, the total package, the Narcissist. You love yourself. The Narcissist was a great gimmick. I loved it because him and Bobby Heenan were a great match, and Lex Luger had a very interesting way of delivering his promos. I always enjoyed it. I enjoyed his heel work more than anything else. Honestly, as a fan favorite or a babyface, if you want to call him that, I just thought his best work was as a heel with that arrogance and that overconfidence, that cocky attitude, the physique, and you got to remember now, people's finishers kind of, they should anyway, kind of resemble who their characters are. So the torture rack was great because he just picked the guy up and broke him in half over his back. And that seems to very much, kind of made up with his persona, maybe better than some guys. And I know that, you can look at a character and, Jake Roberts, the next 3 letters out of your mouth are DDT. You look at Lex Luger and the torture rack fit him like a glove. So I thought that his movesets and his persona as a heel, he was the best in his career. I love the Narcissist. I thought it was great. And the Lex Express, with all due respect, it really didn't garner any interest to me. I was kind of running out of juices, so to speak, in the business. I've been watching the wrestling at the time. I was getting into school and getting out of high school, so it was something that I really didn't follow too much. But I also did it because I didn't really care for it so much. I didn't like Yokozuna really either at the beginning. So it is what it is.
Sure. Well, I would say, I would agree. I always liked Lex as a heel
I always thought he was hilarious. I don't think he gets that much credit for when he was saying, like, the narcissist, when he would pick the people apart. And again, in a period of time in WCW that he actually kind of shared my view on when he was talking about the new blood, and even before then when Russo and Ferrara came in. When they had Lex as kind of the scheming, him and Elizabeth kind of were tricking Sting, or I remember a certain segment that I remember telling you about when they had Jim Duggan back there and they had him like as the janitor. I specifically remember laughing out loud as Luger and Elizabeth walked by Duggan on Nitro there, and he's mopping the floor, and Luger, very straight face, is like, "Hey, Jim, good to see you're working again." And then they kind of chuckled at each other when he walked away. I always thought he didn't get much credit for that good sarcasm. But getting back to what you were saying with about Luger, you didn't see much necessarily as the Lex Express or the babyface. I think that time was real cartoony, and I would agree with you there. Outside of like Bret, there weren't that many really believable guys. Everybody, even the Lex Express, even though it was Lex Luger, the USA thing was real over the top. So to a degree, I would agree with that. But again, there were points in his career when that Clash of Champions, when Barry Windham and Lex Luger on the first Clash of Champions won that tag team titles, that place went absolutely nuts. There was no more power. And at that point in time, he was a great, that Flair match that he said the doctor was mad that he got scammed with the Baltimore Great American Bash there when he had him in the rack and the match was stopped. I mean, at that point as a babyface, there was no one better than Lex Luger. Maybe even Hulk Hogan included. I mean, speaking of Hulk Hogan, the NWO angle, Sting didn't wrestle a lick during that. He sat in the rafters. Lex Luger was pretty much the guy carrying the ball that got that win. And again, like he said, that place was going nuts when Hogan's hand was hitting, tapping, and he had him in that rack.
Oh, yeah, dude, people were going, but we were going berserk.
So there were points in time that the babyface Luger worked, and it worked as well as anyone ever did. But again, I would agree with you. He was probably a more believable bad guy and a heel, and especially like he said, life kind of mirrored it with the way he was conducting himself at that point in time. The narcissist and the arrogance and stuff. It came across as very believable.
Well, and the landscape of professional wrestling had changed by that time, and it was, your real personality, who you are, and they always say your best character is yourself blown up times 100 or 1,000,000 or whatever, so very cliche phrases like that, and they seem to hold true. However, when you look into the Attitude Era or the Monday Night Wars, that 95 to 2000, 2001, and even going forward, people, the development of a character, even if you held the old name, Sting or Lex Luger or Hulk Hogan, people's personas were changing with the times. And if you didn't, you were just getting swept away and you'd get no TV time. And so it seems to kind of speak for Lex Luger and his, storyline or stage character, the Lex Luger character, is that he was able to kind of develop along with the times, and his later stuff was awesome because he was just like that guy that he's like that guy He's just, a big muscular dude. He's been around forever, very experienced, but like you said, he had that era of sarcasm that he could slide right in, certainly big enough and powerful enough and still very mobile in the ring to do whatever he liked to do with someone. So it was great to see him win the title. And I really think at points in time throughout his career that Lex Luger had been unfairly kind of compared to a guy like Hulk Hogan because he's the big guy, blonde guy, great physique, could do all the moves and everything, and he seemed like that just, there's only one Hulk Hogan, man. You can't make another Hulk Hogan. They're trying to do it now. They've been trying to do it now for several years with the guy with the jean shorts and the hat, whatever. They keep trying to do that, and it bothers me because, once you got something, just leave it be. Why don't you make this guy something entirely different and kind of advance his character that way? So, and another thing as we're talking about it that kind of I liked about Lex Luger is there's several different brands of people in the world, and that carries over to professional wrestling. And there's the people that are involved in the politics, and they need to have it. They need to feed their ego by doing that stuff. Lex never seemed to be that type of a guy, Scum. He was like, oh, what do you want me to do? I'm going to lose tonight. Sweet, man, I'll be out. No worries. And go ahead and get it handled. So I kind of enjoyed hearing that from him, that he's like, I never got into that backstage stuff. Whatever they needed me to do as a company guy, I'll go ahead and do it.
Yeah, he actually said he appreciated that he wasn't a part of that. So, again, you never know. And, again, back to where everyone was saying, why didn't WCW turn around work with the WWF writers back there in the late 90s and the new blood and everything? And what you hear is, those guys didn't want to do this, and the older guys didn't want to do this, and the newer guys. From what he said, everyone thought it was a pretty good concept. He was one of those older veterans. He said, I thought it was a great idea. Maybe it was too much too fast or something. But so, again, I don't know where these things, again, unless people are just saying one thing and it's the opposite of what happened, which, you got to take a man for face at his word. Those are the things that I don't know. Like I said, I don't know the man, but from what he said there, he sounded like it wasn't like he couldn't recall. Didn't seem like he was too foggy on his memory. I know he made the joke about short-term memory, and then laughed about it. But he seemed to have a pretty crisp memory about everything, dating all the way back to when he was playing football. So, again, I don't see why he would just change the story there. I don't think he had any problem owning up to anything that he ever did. So, it just makes you wonder on a lot of things. Steve, one more thing I wanted to touch on here before we wrap things up. Another thing that you brought up that I just thought was fantastic is when he spoke about working with Ricky Steamboat. You were briefly touching on it there, and how he said, he sat down and would go through each moment of the match, the beginning, the end, and kind of taught him how to, the psychology of a match and how to tell that story. And then in their final build-up, the culmination of their feud, without him knowing, like, all right, kid, you're calling the match tonight. And again, you hear a lot of people say, Lex didn't even like being a wrestler. He didn't like this. What did he say? I was like a kid on Christmas morning. He said, I wanted to run and get slammed off the top rope and do everything, the bad guy, just like Flair. He said, I wanted to put this guy's finish over so much when I was calling the match. I just thought that was a great story, again, that I never really heard said anywhere, the extent of this. I do actually believe at one point our always seems to get his name dropped on here somewhere, but I believe our international correspondent, Matt, had a picture and a story up about Steamboat speaking about working with Luger, one of the two, either or. But outside of that, I don't think I've ever heard in that detail that interaction spoken of. So I thought that was really cool. Ricky Steamboat, by all recollections of anyone, a fantastic guy and obviously a great legendary in-ring worker. It was really cool to hear Lex, tell that story, I thought.
Oh, I totally agree. And what I caught out of that, and I think you touched on it a little bit, is the tone of voice in which he told that story. And you said kid in a candy shop and the way he felt back then. Well, when listen, we all are proud of certain things in our lives, and our children do something well. We get on the horn, we talk about it with all this sense of pride. You could hear it come through in his voice when he was talking about that incident and working with Ricky Steamboat. And that was genuine excitement still to this day, that he's like, I can't believe he did that. And it was so, and that's, again, now you get a personal slice of who these folks are when you have a chance to sit down and talk to them. And I thought it was something fantastic to hear the emotion in his voice. And again, now, by no means are we any sort of broadcast journalists here, Scum. We run in a podcast, a couple of fans that, we're old enough to try to keep a modicum of professionalism throughout all this. So we want to try to sound in some way, shape, or form, professional and relay these stories and this information to our listeners. But it's extremely difficult at points in times having the honor to speak to some of these guys. And listening to their stories on the other end of the phone line, you're like, this is freaking incredible. You have everything you do to not just go crazy listening to it. So very excited about what we did tonight. Lex Luger, author of Wrestling with the Devil. It was co-written, Scum, by a sports writer here down in Atlanta, John Hollis. It's a fantastic book. It's great. $22.99 is the cover price on it for you. Go down to your Barnes & Nobles and pick this up, guys. It's a great book and certainly worth a read. And, again, now, there has to be, Scum, and we're not going to stick on the subject. There has to be people out there with like minds that they just want to hear great stories and they just want to enjoy the glory days of professional wrestling without all these people getting on the internet and talking trash about everybody. So go out, buy his book, support him in any way you can. He's on Twitter now, once again, at Genuine Lex Luger. We are on Twitter at SBUTERA33, Wrestling's Glory Days. We're all over the place, guys. WGD Weekly, the Stephen the Scum. Thanks so much for tuning in. We got another incredible show lined up. Man, we have a landslide of people that we're going to deal with. It's a hectic week around the WGD studios here in parts unknown. We got several different interviews this week we need to put in the can, and I know this one here is right in the middle of one that we did last night, another one we got in a few days here, Scum. So what an exciting night, and I am pretty much out of gas at this point.
Yeah, I hear you running out of steam there. Next week on the program, we're going to have Alex Wright, which will certainly be an interesting sit down. Our first European guest on the show, let's say. He'll be sitting down with us and talking about his career, which, from all recollections that I've heard, started at an extremely young age, following in the footsteps of his father. So looking forward to that. Plenty of other great stuff on the horizon, plenty of irons in the fire, as I like to say. Once again, we'd like to thank the total package, Lex Luger, for coming on, being so honest, being so forthright with all of our questions. And, that I just wanted to say that wasn't just me sucking up the Lex. When I got that book, I sat down and read the whole thing almost cover to cover. I finished it the next day.
I remember when you told me that.
It's a great read. I mean, I wasn't just saying that to say, to quote unquote put Lex over, because he certainly don't need me putting him over. He had Hogan tapping out to the rack on Nitro. He don't need the Scum giving him the rub or passing the torch, let's say. From all recollections, the Scum was never willing to pass the torch. He's never willing to put over that young talent.
Yeah, backstage.
You know what I'm doing? Yeah, the Scum has always been locker room cancer. So he's not. He ain't putting anybody over. The Scum don't lay down for anybody, people. Just to get that straight right now. But anyway, Lex Luger, thanks a lot for being with us tonight. Pick up the book, Wrestling with the Devil. And that's about all I have too, Steve. To our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. We will see you next week. Everybody, have a good one.
Yeah, and folks, we're about to sign off, and I want to throw one more thing in here. And as we go, we got to add more things because we're getting involved and more involved with the industry of professional wrestling in some capacity or another. Check this out, guys. We talked about this on prior episodes. Don't forget, $20 a week until the end of November ain't going to kill you. Save up your money. November 30th, Winston-Salem, Ben Convention Center, WrestleCade. Biggest event that I know myself and the Scum, we've been to WrestleManias. We've been all over the East Coast watching wrestling. Myself, I've been out west in the Tucson area with the Trent boys, Brad Canoe, Corey, all those guys. We have a great time going to see wrestling events. But all of this is going to culminate into some of the biggest superstars ever meeting at Ben Convention Center, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, on November 30th of 2013. And Scum, I know we got a lot of cool stuff in the works there, don't we?
Yeah, we sure do. We sure do. And again, I'm pretty sure that for $20, you got your ticket into the Fan Fest and your ticket to the live event, which the card there is just fantastic. Some big news will be forthcoming on that as the event gets closer. They already have some great matches signed, and you can check out www.wrestlecade.com or check out WrestleCade on Facebook for further details on who's going to be there, who's going to be appearing, who's going to be in the matches at that event. But yeah, I mean, we're excited. Hey, Steve and the Scum are going to be there. We're going to be front and center with a former ECW champion, Just Incredible, as he might say. That's not just the best. That's not just the coolest. That's just incredible.
Just incredible. and we won't charge for our autograph. So come on over and hang out. Our autograph is worth exactly nothing. Like if you look at a coupon and it says the coupon is worth like 1 with 9 zeros and then 1 cent after it, that's about what our autograph's worth now, but I stress now. So come get it before we get huge. Just joking with you guys. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See you around.